Today's topic is around AI for beginners. It's easier to use than you think. I think a lot of folks, are perhaps curious or um, interested in AI, but haven't really taken advantage of it. I think I read a stat the other day that maybe 13 or 14% of folks have tried ChatGPT, even though it's so widely heard about. And so hopefully this will uh, make it so that folks feel more comfortable leveraging AI in your day-to-day work with volunteers. And so, yeah, with that, let me introduce myself real quickly. So my name is Gun Wong. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Civic Champs. You could see some of the random background about me, where I went to school and whatnot. But basically, if you haven't joined us in the past, Civic Champs, we're a volunteer management software platform. And so our mission is really to empower the volunteer managers and coordinators out there to help them with all of their daily tasks, from onboarding to recruitment to engaging to retaining their volunteers, right? So that's our mission. But enough about me. I'm more excited to introduce our guest today, Nick Fitz. He's the founder and CEO at Momentum. And Nick went to school at Grinnell and has a master's from the University of British Columbia. Nick is a former academic as well, and has done research at Duke around behavioral science. Is really thoughtful about AI and also how that might impact how you design it so that it can influence decision making, right? And how you can impact that in terms of specifically donors and volunteers, right, to help you with your work. So his work's been featured in the Washington Post, Box, and Nature. And then Nick, I think I could share, right? You had a sort of a viral moment a couple of years ago, when you and your team created Defeat by Tweet as a platform. So that was pretty exciting, where folks were automatically donating $1 when somebody was tweeting politically about something that maybe they were not in favor of, right? So, but with that, yeah, Nick, I'll sort of turn it over to you to say hi and introduce Momentum and the topic.
Yeah, thanks, Gang. Happy to chat with everyone here. I love, like, a lot of the notes here were curious or unsure or interested in AI. And I'd love to start off with just some questions, actually, if anyone is willing to share, like, their questions around AI or why they're here. Or I'd love to hear from a couple folks. Like, it's a big topic, and yeah, I'm curious where people are at, if anyone's up to share a bit. Oh, yeah, okay, it's in the chat.
We got a couple questions coming in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, how do we use it to help with anything? What are the different kinds of AI? Yeah, okay, cool. How people are making money using it. Great. So I'll cover, I think, a range of different things here. A bit on me. My background was in academia, as Gang mentioned. I grew up in DC. I went to undergrad in Iowa and grad school out in Vancouver, and then in England at Oxford. And then I was at Duke just as a staff behavioral scientist, and doing a lot of research on the psychology of donations or donors, and then of fundraisers. I started Momentum about 5 years ago, and we've built a bunch of different things. Gung alluded to some of the donation infrastructure we make, but what we make now is essentially an AI inbox for fundraisers, like Outlook or Gmail or something like this, but built for people raising money. And then what we think about is like an AI assistant or chief of staff for different people on the fundraising team. And it's essentially helping people manage a funnel, right? Who to reach out to and when, and what to say and how to say it, and then how to help follow up with it or take notes. And a lot of this is relevant, well, for managing a volunteer funnel. Great. Okay, so there's some great questions in here. And so what I want to do basically, right, is talk about AI in terms of this, say the volunteer life cycle. We'll say just very broadly, like, recruiting, engaging, and retaining people. And then different ways you can use it, and some other things to think about. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, can y'all see this all here?
Yep.
Okay. So a few things to say about AI in the first place. Like, um, it's very helpful, but I think if you're not doing basic things, like we always say, if you're not raising money from your board, don't worry about AI, right? And maybe in this case, like if you don't have some basic volunteer stuff set up, it's a thing that'll help you enhance things and do less admin work and all of this, but it's not going to replace really anyone here, right? It's kind of enabling people. And maybe the other thing to say about it is I'll show some tools here, and I'll basically just show chat, or ChatGPT. It's a tool from OpenAI. I'm sure some people have used it or heard about it, have mentioned it here. It's one of a variety of what are called large language models or foundation models, but basically there are these companies. OpenAI is one, Anthropic is another, Microsoft is, invested more than $10 billion in OpenAI. Google and Amazon have an Anthropic. There are a few others that make these, and then they let people like us build on top of them. And so there's tons and tons of tools using these models. But what's basically happening is they're being used in two main ways, right? Just to the question on kinds of AI, there's predictive and generative AI. Let's just keep it very broad. And there's the predictive stuff that's been around for a long time. It's often referred to as machine learning, and it's looking at, it's helping us answer who in my CRM would be the most likely to volunteer. It's doing a bunch of analysis, basically, right? Or when should I reach out to them? And so it's crunching a bunch of numbers and figuring out, and you can pull from your CRM or from your MailChimp or from any other place and, answer questions like that. And then there are, why it's gotten so hot recently, or why there's been all this talk, is this rise of generative AI. GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformers, right? But the point here is just that it can now create videos, create images, right, and create text. And so a lot of that is being used for, like, what do I say? How do I say it? And so you can go use a tool like chat, and it's as good as the context that it has, right? So to the question that I read earlier about, how much should I use it myself or not? There are tools, right? And we make some of this stuff that will help you sort of train it on your writing, right? Or train it on your CRM, right? And it gets more useful the more you connect it to stuff. So you connect it to Civic Champs, right? And you connect it to your CRM, you connect it to these things, and it's more and more helpful. There's lots of data privacy things to talk about too. There's a whole range of this. And I think maybe the last thing to say about it is, like, there can be a lot of friction around using it too, right? So I'm happy to just also talk here or talk later about just what are easy ways to actually put it to use for your org. So what I'd love to do here is just talk about how it might help you in different parts of this cycle, right? And so let's say on the, like, recruiting, on the side of recruiting volunteers, right? And let's think about this as just identifying volunteers in your database, qualifying them, like who's a fit for what events coming up. It can help you answer questions like this, right? So I'll show you an earlier chat I just had right before this. And this is ChatGPT. This is a tool from OpenAI. There's a general one here, right? That's just like GPT-4. And let's say that I write, like, your experienced volunteer manager at a nonprofit, come up with best practices. Let's say volunteer life cycle. So I'm sure some of you has used this, some of you haven't. It will generally do things like this, right? And here it will go through, in fact, what we're looking at here and how to, it can come up with a strategy and it can tell you a bunch of things about this. This is
Yeah,
all,
that's awesome.
but it'll write out here for people. What I'll show here, so it'll go on, and you can continue to interact with it. Here, what we've done here is made a version of this where it's trained on stuff that it's trained on a bunch of stuff, right? And you can make one. I can show an example. What I mean by that is like, and you can make one of these yourself through chat, but I've uploaded lit reviews, list of all the billionaires, in this case a list of a ton of donation, every gift above $1 million in the last 10 years, an Adrian Sargent book, a lit review of fundraising. It has access to the web, it can make images, and I've connected it to the donor search API here, which just means that I've connected it to a donor search account so that it can do wealth screens or some of that kind of thing. And so, over here I asked it, right, what does it look like to come up with a cycle? And let's actually see this one. Right, so I asked it, you're an expert volunteer manager. I'm somebody who works at Civic Champs. I'd love to build out a strategy. Can you build out a bio for Gung, right? And how would I engage him? And so it'll come up with this. It didn't have some stuff on it, but it does have access to the internet. So it looked up him on LinkedIn. And so it'll come up with a general strategy. And then down here, right, it's like, this is Gung's volunteer bio and engagement strategy. And so you get, he's the CEO of Civic Champs, some of the skills, here's things that here's how you might want to use, here's what you might want to do with him, right, to have him volunteer. Other aspects of community engagement, right, things that you should do next. And so you connect it to your database, right? Or you can upload it, you can do it in a sheet. You don't have to get complicated with it. If you have our Razor's Edge, right? There's lots of different ways to do it, and I'm happy to sync on that, but it doesn't have to be very complicated, right? You don't need to play with APIs. You can just upload a sheet. It depends on kind of privacy questions and all of this, but it's easy enough to do. Is the short answer. You can also ask it for a bio, right? As I showed, like, what do we know about them? Come up with a specific plan for gun, blood, donation events, NBC, January 15th, draft, and email to. And so we'll see what it will do here. But you can interact with it to try to do this for a specific donor, right? Or you can do this in a batch. And so it has some of this. You can imagine how you might use this to make a plan for every donor, for a particular batch of donors that you want to recruit, or a particular batch of volunteers. And I'll show you in a second about, we can talk in a second about how it might help volunteers themselves. And so then it'll draft the email to Gung, right? And if I had upload an email that I've sent, or a batch of emails, and I say, here's my writing, right? It can do it more and more on my writing. It doesn't have to be, again, connected to your email to do it all this way. And so I think it's worth thinking about recruitment, like, who do you reach out to? When do you reach out to them? What do you say, right? As an example of all this, I can show you this is our technology here. But what's happening is that we're saying, like, reach out to somebody. You could say, actually reach out to these volunteers, and you can, draft an email. It will do the same thing, right, that we just saw there, although it's pulling from chat. And the you can I think maybe one way to think about this too is it depends on if you have if you're trying to get individual volunteers for a particular thing, or if you want to do this in mass to like, you're trying to get 100 volunteers and you're trying to mail merge something out. And you can do that. You can upload and do that kind of thing here as well yourself.
And, and Nick, there's a couple questions that came in. I think Crystal asked, to train something, you can upload articles. And then I think Kurt said, for ChatGPT, you want to give context statement. He had a question around how do you connect it to other AI tools? I don't know if you wanted to touch on that as
Yeah,
well.
so this is sort of where it gets a little bit more complicated. You can, when people say train something, like you can just get onto chat, onto like this, on regular chat, right? Just this sort of thing, and interact with it. And you can say like, hey, like I did at the beginning, and make a plan for this. And then you can say, here's some of my writing. Can you write it like that? And here are the donors, and you can upload it in the chat correspondence, which is like a very manual way to do it. There are a bunch of tools, like we make a tool like this. I'm sure Gung is building stuff like this. There are tools that will do that. They'll do pieces of that, like train it on your writing, or tie it to your CRM and stuff. And now OpenAI in the last few weeks have released something called assistants, and that's what I'm showing here, that will help you. You can make essentially your own assistant, right? And we make this for our customers, but you can go on, make a GPT, it's called. And in this case, you can create it by interacting with it, and then you can, or do it this way, right? And you can see here, this is this is what I was showing before, where I've uploaded some stuff. And so you can upload, like, say a printout PDF of your own emails, and it doesn't need many, right? You can upload 5 emails. We've had people give us a poem that they want to train it on, and have their writing be a little bit more, say, lighter that way. But there is, see, we also work with very large orgs who care a lot about where the data sits and goes, right? And so you end up, to the extent you want to say, well, I want to anonymize what goes up to chat and what comes back, right? Or I want everything to be HIPAA compliant, right? Or I want it to be encrypted in this way. Then you end up needing to use a tool or an enterprise version of chat that has built those things. But it's also, I don't want to encourage people to, I don't know what people's practices are here, right? And as I said, we work with like hospitals and universities and large nonprofits and smaller ones, of course, too. But I don't want to like encourage people to do things that are against how they, do stuff. But I don't want it also to feel like, you have to go hire a ton of people to handle this. Like you can basically get on and play with what I'm showing here. And I can share a version of all this after. I can share this stuff. This stuff is all public as well. And it's, we can spin up a volunteer sort of chat. And why I raise this in particular is you can imagine making one of these for your volunteers that has all of the all of your best practices on volunteering. It has access to a lot of stuff about your org, all of these things that you might normally be trying to answer. It has access to your knowledge base, and it's not that you wouldn't also respond to people on it, but that people have their own ability to interact with it and answer questions as well. Yeah, so this is all, so just to the question of free, so this version that I'm showing here is GPT-4. It's the one that's like $20 a month. And anyone can get on and use that. And it's like, they've made it even easier to connect it to different, to different parts of your ecosystem. So we've been playing with connecting it, to CRMs of the people we work with, right? And in this case, I've connected it to donor search, and here's where it gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because when you're trying to tie it to like your CRM through an API integration, but it's not also incredibly complicated, to tell you the truth. Like, then somebody can help you with this, but even so, you can still upload stuff to it and sheets, and it has web browsing and all of this. And this is all just the $20 version.
And then for the free version, Nick, is that what features would be unavailable, or what can you do on just the free version?
I don't think you can make your own. They just released this recently, right? The ability to make your own, what they call GPT. And it's like a light version of that, right? We do a sort of heavier version of that for folks, but I think the free version is just the regular interaction,
Yeah,
um, just 3 and 3.5, and 4, um, we'll just say it's like much better. It's way more helpful. Um, um, yeah, it's very well worth it.
got it. So there's not a the main difference looks like it doesn't have sort of preset learned content, and you sort of have to not retrain, but sort of put that in manually each time you're engaging with it. Is
Yeah,
that
and you would do that with 4 as well, like I'm doing here,
yeah?
right? As we said, like, here's the bio for Gang. And in this case, it's just that like I could upload my list of volunteers to what I've called Edna here, and then it would know all that for all future interactions.
Yeah,
The free version is the same. I mean, if you make, you can also just on the $20 version use regular chat, um, like this GPT-4, and say, come up with a um,
yeah. Like write an event description for my volunteering event called XYZ, or for I think Brittany is asking. So Brittany's at a Habitat for Humanity build or something, right? Yeah, Habitat for Humanity.
and then like let's say, yeah, we'll do that. But then you can ask it to do a lot of parts of the thing, personalize it for this person or do that. And so to your point, you can drop in information. You can say, hey, redo this, but do this for Gung. Redo this, but do this for these 10 people. And you can dropping in people and having that interaction with it. And so in that interaction you have with it, that it saves over on the left here, right? We
Sure.
have many different things here, but it will um you can keep having that single interaction with it. It's just that it won't have access to like your database, let's say, right, or other tools that you might want to connect it to. um the
Right.
other, yeah, the other thing I'm interested in actually is just in this tool for volunteers. So um yeah, there is that aspect of like, Intercom has a tool called Fin that's sorting basically 40% of people's customer service requests. And so to the extent that there's a lot of interacting with volunteers, a lot of that can be sorted, not all of it, of course, and we're never trying to replace anyone here. It's as much as just sort some of the admin work for people. But a lot of that can be answered by like having people be able to ask questions this way. And then um, on the sort of engagement and scheduling, it's a similar funnel, right? Of you're just like, well, who do I reach out today, and when, and what should I say to them? And you can ask it these questions, right? And you can say, what do I say and how do I say it? And I have an event coming up in 2 weeks. Can you draft these emails to these people and these
Mm,
follow-ups? And as I said, when you connect it to say a system, like the more you connect it to things, you can build in alerts and reminders and all of that, right? You can do that with your calendar. There is something on like, so there's what we've talked about so far is like predictive and then generative AI, this stuff. There's also sort of what's referred to as automatic speech recognition. And so um, let's say you have a talk with certain volunteers, and there's different contexts in which this might matter for people. So there might be events that you want to do this with. You see this on Loom. This is a tool called Fireflies. And you could imagine that you might like record a training for volunteers that's internal, or a conversation, or with one volunteer and share it with others, or that you are you're catching up with whoever led somebody is trying to talk about, how their event went, and you're trying to catch up on that, right? And so we use a tool called Fireflies. There's many others. We build something into this for our customers as well, but you basically have a conversation
A
with
really good
somebody,
vibe about
right?
you
In
guys.
this case,
If-
it's somebody on my
like,
team
you're
talking to
my first
an
choice.
advisor of ours, and it'll give you the transcript, right? It'll give you the summary of it, right? In this case, we're talking about building something around an auction, and then it'll give you, how much each person talked and stuff like this, right? And that's maybe more relevant for major donor stuff, but it depends. There are cases where people have certain volunteers, the president is volunteering for them, or certain, I mean, the president of the university, right, or certain people are volunteering for them. And maybe the more helpful thing is, say, for somebody who just managed a volunteer event, right? You can just as easily download like the Fireflies app, let's say. In this case, we integrate with text and do this, but the point is the same, where you can leave a voice note, or you can just hop onto Fireflies, right? They now have an app that they released just last week, and say like, hey, here's what happened, right? Often people don't want to write up a whole contact report or an event report, and get it up into the CRM or wherever you're storing it. And so to be able to say, hey, here's what happened. In this case, you'd say, hey, we had this volunteer event. Here's what happened. A few people were interested in these things. You know, and then you can kind of start the thing again to think, well, who's interested in sort of, who's a fit for continuing to volunteer, who's a fit for recruiting other volunteers, who's a fit for potentially donating. But it will, you know, in this case, you know, summarize it and ask for next steps. And you may already have these next steps in the case of the volunteer event, but the idea is just really in the recording piece, right, and having it summarized, right, or having this kind of captured. And so there's a lot that it can do in terms of kind of notes and admin work around either internal meetings. You know, we record our internal meetings and external meetings. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we use AI just as a business outside of this, but certainly on the like the final part of the funnel, right, or the final part of this kind of engagement and reporting on this, capturing what happened, it can make much easier and much more sort of frictionless. And then you can similarly, you know, have that stuff recorded and say, well, what happened? Can you give me a summary of this, right? And if it has access to those things, you can do that. Yeah, I think there's so many different ways to dig in here, but what I'd love to do here, I know it's just such a wide range of questions, that I'd love to just do questions. I don't know if we have other.
Yeah, if folks have questions, you know, certainly feel free to come off mute. But also if you want to put some questions for Nick in chat, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do here. You know, I use personally AI, ChatGPT every day, because I do a number of demos and things, and so that's why I had the example with Habitat earlier, just because it's a lot faster for ChatGPT to create a sort of a mock event description, so I can kind of customize that when I'm presenting, you know, civic champs to nonprofits as an example. And I can imagine for me, oftentimes it's, you know, it can be very daunting to have a blank page, right? So if you're thinking, oh, you know, I need to write a volunteer handbook and I've never written a handbook, one way is to Google and find a template for a handbook. But another could be that you can come, you know, you can get a semi-pre customized handbook, right? Using ChatGPT, where you say, hey, I'm part of an animal shelter. Its name is X. We're based, you know, in whatever city or state. And I'm the volunteer manager, and we're looking to create a handbook. Please draft a volunteer handbook, right? And ChatGPT will just, you know, we'll kind of write one for you. And then you can go back in, you know, and edit it, right, so that it's really specific. But that's an easy way to get started with things, right, in my mind. So, but yeah, if, you know, if folks have specific questions for Nick, I think he's sort of excited to dig in. Let me see if there's anything that Carol, there's some other questions from earlier. Yeah, so Carol was wondering if AI can be used to help with creation of parenting support group.
Parenting support group. Certainly in the creation of it, I mean, in a lot of ways, everything is a funnel. So in putting it together, like who's a fit for it, what should you say to each person, when should you reach out to them, you know, helping you schedule them, and then stay in contact with them, right? And some of that's just calendaring, and some of that is using AI in those ways. But I don't know if I would use it inside the support group.
Yeah. And then Crystal asks a question, are there ways to use it specifically with civic champs? Good question. Yeah, I think so, right? So if you think about you can certainly it's again, to Nick's point on what you're comfortable sort of uploading into ChatGPT, but you can download a history, an Excel of all the history of your volunteers experience, right? And you can upload it to ChatGPT and actually ask it questions around, who are my top volunteers based on hours, right? And things like that. You can similarly, right, have it draft perhaps for a certain a cohort of folks, or you can ask it to find analytics, right? With where are there can you show me the correlation between folks who have volunteered more than 20 hours and whether they are happy or not based on maybe a sentiment analysis of the feedback or reflections that they've left with the organization. And then and then finally, of course, when you're creating events, you can use chat to again draft certain things for you, right? Or even a waiver, right? So you're saying, hey, I need a photo release waiver. That's something that chat is probably very good at because it's pulling from the whole universe of photo release waivers that it can find online and see, what is, what tends to be out there. You might want to run it by your legal team, but it could be again a way to lessen the cost for folks, right? It's a lot easier to review something than to create something fresh and new.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps. Yeah, I
Um,
don't know, Nick, if you would
and
add anything.
I wouldn't, I mean, it's the same. The only thing I'd add to that, right, is around the legal paperwork, and it's to Crystal's question, like, it isn't so, I mean, it's private. It's not, when you put something on chat, it's not like it's public so that other people can read it and see the data or something this way, but it's not, chat uses it, OpenAI uses it to train their models and it goes into their system. And so there's a version of chat that's like enterprise, right? There's different things you can do. You can say you want it to live on your own server. We have built something that anonymizes the data we send up to chat because we work with healthcare orgs as well. But it, you know, it's not, it depends how many, I think you can upload, it depends on your stance on it, right? I mean, it's not making it public to everyone else. But it definitely is dependent on the kind of work that you do. And I wouldn't like upload legal docs to it necessarily. Or at least I would, like, if you want to use it in those ways, I think it's like if you want to the extent you really want to dig in with it and use it in those ways, then I would also use something that makes it private, of which
Yeah.
there are tools that do this.
You can anonymize your you could use IDs, right, or something that anonymizes it, and then you can match it back up on your end.
That's what we do, yeah. And but yeah, I'd love to also just hear people. I mean, I don't, we obviously hear about people's problems with volunteering, but it's not the main thing that I am thinking about every day. And I'd love to hear people's, but it's a funnel all the same, right? And I'd love to hear just people's main pain points. Is it like figuring out who to reach out to, or if, these 30 people are kind of organizing them, or getting them the content they need to do it, or kind of getting the information from them after and getting the reporting, right? Or what are the kind of most frustrating things that people wake up most stressed, go to sleep most frustrated by, I guess, in their jobs, I guess, or and in the volunteer process, finding new volunteers.
Yep. Yeah, to reduce burnout. That's cool.
To reduce burnout of the current ones, like not going to the same folks constantly and churning. Um, yeah, I do think a lot of this is very helpful on figuring out, right, uploading a database to it and saying who, and the more information it has on people, the better, right? And saying who's the best fit for volunteering, right? Or for what I have these events coming up, or these volunteer opportunities that I'd love to fill, right? Who'd be the best for it in a way that doesn't burn people out. You'd be surprised at how well it can do that sort of thing. given some data it has.
Right. Yeah, maybe encourage to, it's probably not able to independently find find Nick and say, hey, Nick's going to be a great volunteer for you. But I think chat could be really good for identifying who your ideal volunteer profile looks
Yeah,
like.
it'll pull out people though as well. No, I mean the same way we can pull out people saying who's a fit for, donating with stock, or who's a fit for,
But
you
you
know,
have to give it
oh,
the
yeah.
data, right?
It doesn't. No, I mean, it won't magically know. You need to upload you need to either connect it to your CRM, or upload it in this case, or even just paste it in, or depending on how people want to do this. But if it has the information about who your volunteers are, right, or who your donors are, or who your entire database is, it definitely will pull out people and rank them and all of this to be like, these people are fit for these things. Here's why. Here's what you should say.
Right.
These people are fit for these ones. It's incredibly good at that sort of like large data question.
Right. Right.
Like scarily good at it. It'll find major donors who have gone out of their way to hide their wealth, because hiding your wealth still is a signal. And so it'll find them this way, right? It's like, it's gotten quite good at analyzing stuff beyond what even like good data scientists can do.
Crystal had a question about what tools are needed to import that data and keep it private. So if someone did want to use it, but did want to anonymize their data set, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah. So you can use, and Griff is here too, I think, on my team, who can really speak to this. I don't know if he can mute or unmute. I guess nobody can unmute, maybe, as part of what's happening. So that's why all the questions are chat. Okay, that makes sense. I think so. There's a version of chat you can pay for, that I can just bring out. Oh, my screen isn't sharing anymore. There's an enterprise version of chat.
I'll just jump in. I mean, Nick is going to be, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
we can hear you.
Nick is going to talk a little bit. I'm Griff. I work with Nick.
Griff leads growth with us.
He's gonna point you to chat. Has some paid tiers where it basically keeps stuff anonymous for you. You can always go ahead and pay for it. And some of those are pretty cheap, right? If that's not in the budget, what you can often do is basically just, if you export like a CSV of your volunteer data, you can take any of the identifiable fields, so names, emails, phone numbers, any of those sorts of things that are obviously sensitive, just delete them and replace them with an ID. So just literally like volunteer 1, volunteer 2, volunteer 3. And then you're able to upload that directly into chat and just say, pretend like the ID fields are their names here. And then it will basically come back to you and say, hey, volunteer 3 is a really good fit or whatever. And then you just have to make sure that you have a document somewhere where you keep track of like, hey, volunteer 3 was in fact this individual. And then you're fine. And we, whatever, we're a software company. We do a more sophisticated version of that, but it's basically just like, if you keep any of the identifiable info out of there, and replace it with an anonymous ID, you've essentially achieved the goal.
Right. What we'll do is we'll write something up about this, where we're like, you can do it with a tool like us that does all this stuff and is built for nonprofits, or a tool like Civic Champs. You can do it by paying chat more and sort of using these sort of prompts and doing it, or you can do it in this way, right, where you just do what Griff said and you anonymize the stuff. And I can imagine actually that would be quite helpful, because it's not so clear, I think, what the differences between all these are. And we'll try to put something together where we just put some screenshots into it and send it out.
That'd be great. And I see a hand raise, Kelsey.
Totally get it's confusing.
If you wanted to come off mute.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I have some questions, or I'm thinking around, some of the pain points that I have in my work. I work at a free clinic, so our model is different from a lot of other nonprofit organizations. And we mostly do, skills-based volunteers, and not as many like big volunteer events and stuff like that. But kind of some of the pain points that I have are around, like, I haven't been able to find like any one system that can do a lot of things. So there's like multiple systems that don't talk to each other. So I'm the only link that like is, putting these pieces in place. But like, what I would want is like a tool that can automate some of these things and can talk to it. So I don't have to like, have our, for example, onboarding modules hosted in one place.
Mm.
They have to do jot forms to sign the forms or to do quizzes. I have to individually upload each of those forms to their volunteer profile. It's like, how can AI like help alleviate some of those pain points? And also, kind of in early stages, like I created a volunteer interest form, but then I send an email to each of those people that's customized. Like, how can I get AI to like draft some of those
Right.
in an easy way without me having to still go in and draft every single email?
Yeah. So on the and just one clarification question. It sounds like, because you mentioned skill, more highly skilled volunteers versus a broader base. Are you like, is it batches of say 10 who are coming to do stuff at a time, or 15? Like, what are the numbers roughly? The kind of, what are you roughly trying to deal with?
Right. We don't do a lot of groups, so it's a lot of individual folks. It's
Right, just one-on-one.
doctors,
Yeah, great.
clinicians, also some non-licensed folks, but
Oh yeah,
it's all
cool.
very individual.
Oh no, yeah, okay, I follow it. Yeah, who come in and volunteer there, but who are themselves licensed or unlicensed. So in this case, like the second thing you mentioned is perfect for saying, I have I even know who I'm reaching out to, right? But I'm trying to personalize this outreach to each person. Like, I want it to, be based off of them, and using chat is a perfect thing for this. And that you can say, you can do some of what we showed here and say, I have this person and I'd like to draft an email just for them, and it will do that. But like, having it all in one system that's a clean UX, so that makes sense. Or the first part is around automation. I think this is an important point, which is like, automation isn't AI, and a lot of that is like, I'd almost want to sit down with you and be like, okay, let's have like, when this happens, jot form then goes out automatically, and when it's signed, this thing actually goes to them saying this, right? And like, there it's almost using a tool like Zapier or something that will connect them. And to your point, there isn't, stuff is very fragmented, right? You have the like CRMs, they just hold data, and then you have the intelligence stuff, and you're like, well, how do I use it? And then you have like, well, I'm trying to, draft emails, well, it's over here in chat. And so it is, this is just a problem we're working on, and it's a problem for the whole field, right? Is that it's much more fragmented than other places. So I think people do have to wire up all this stuff. And a lot of what you mentioned at the beginning is stuff that is around automation, and there's a tool called Zapier that is set, says if this happens, then that happens, but still you have to kind of connect it all up, right? And unfortunately, I mean, it's what Gung is building too, hopefully, that is trying to connect all of this. And I know he's thinking about a lot of a lot of this, like, how do you do automation and then also AI, but smart automation is also like just as important, I think.
Yeah. Kelsey, I think our perspective is that the industry, which is thankfully, right, is sort of moving in the direction to support folks like you, right, where even Nick and I, right, with Momentum and Civic Chance, right, we have integrations with like Razor's Edge and and some of these donor CRMs, so that our data can pass back and forth seamlessly. That I agree with Nick, right, is it's not something the AI can necessarily help with, but once the data is connected, right, then sort of that magic can happen when you can create these very personalized communications that leverage all of the information and data you have across the board. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you both.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. I guess any other questions from folks? I saw Emily, I saw you come off. Yeah.
What are some policies that you can think of that need to be put in place when using content created by like ChatGPTs? Because it's not original content, so I'm just curious to hear thoughts on that.
No, it's not original content, and it's all trained on copyrighted content, right? Like, to the extent that they say it isn't, it is. Like, it's trained on the internet. I think attributing it is important the same way you attribute lots of other things. And to that point, I think it's a helpful tool maybe for drafting stuff, right? Or doing research, right? Or saying, hey, can you do this? It can connect to the internet and do research for you, or it can help draft things or outline it. But I think it's very important to have a human in the loop, basically, at least in our case, right? We never want anything to go out to donors or to volunteers or to the public that hasn't been reviewed by somebody and edited. And there's there's a separate set of questions around policies around, data privacy and AI and all this. And I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but even in just the generation of content, it's a very interesting question because, what does it mean to sort of share? Is it like citing your sources, right? And do you say I use chat for this as well as like, this blog post and a bunch of these other things? And then there aren't obvious norms around that sort of that sort of attribution bit. There are better ones around privacy now and anonymizing data and stuff, but it's a big question in the generation of content for sure. And sort of less so when it's around individual communication to volunteers, let's say. But when you're creating content that's public, it is. I think it's just a hard question.
I think, Nick, you made a great point, differentiation there, right? Whether it's a personal communication or whether you're actually publishing something, right? Publishing, right? I think attribution matters a lot more, right? Your personal communications, right? Like we all say that's why chat sounds human in many ways. It's like, it actually turns out we all say the same thing anyway, right? And so it can be quite smart. The other thing, right, is we looked at, right, you can upload and share previous work of your own. And so to capture, it has a benefit of making it sound more like your voice. But second, it actually is, using your language anyway. And so from that perspective, then the attribution piece matters a little bit less, right? In terms of, again, especially if you're doing the one-on-one communications, right?
Yeah, I think it's all gray.
Yeah, very new.
What does it mean for everyone to have an assistant, right? Suddenly that is, even when it's your own writing, right? It's like now everyone has a ghostwriter, which is, new. Everyone who uses it, at least.
Yeah, well, any other questions from folks before we sort of wrap things up a little bit here? All right. Well, if you do think of something, right, please come into, put it in chat and we'll circle back here at the very end. I'm going to share my screen again real quick just to wrap us up here a little bit. And so let me do that. Can you all see my screen again? Perfect. And Kelsey, I think to your point, right, I was talking about earlier, right, one of the ways we think about where a lot of the AI power comes from is through these integrations. And so these are some of our integration partners that we work with, right? So these donor CRMs, so that there's a little bit more seamless communications. But then, I was just talking to Nick earlier, right, because they also have an integration with Razor's Edge NXT, right? Actually, it turns out that our data can flow there, and then now their platform and their AI tools can also act upon our volunteer data, which is kind of neat. And so I think this is the direction that the industry is going to go towards. And then for folks, I just like real quickly, right, since it is our webinar, just to introduce Civic Champs for folks that haven't seen us before, right? And so what you're seeing here is our mobile app. It allows folks to quickly check in and check out. They can also schedule for events, for volunteers, and then admins can also use the mobile app to sort of manage their volunteers, which I think is fairly unique. And a couple things that this allows is, one is at the end we collect feedback and reflections from your volunteers, including how happy they are. And if you're thinking about from an AI perspective, right, or at least from an automation standpoint, right, we can be smart about things, right, where only happy volunteers are maybe solicited for a small dollar donation, but you can also start mining, right, those feedback and comments to say, hey, why is it that people are happy about us, right? What do they love the most? Or when people are unhappy, what is it that it seems is causing that? Right? And so that's kind of an interesting way to leverage AI potentially, right? So here on the back end, you can see our dashboard, you can see who's happy or not, their reflections. And again, to Nick's point, you can always export, maybe anonymize the content. Actually, probably in this case, just delete all the identifiers and just say, hey, you know, when you look at people that are happy or not, and you look at their reflections, right? What are some common themes that are coming through? And you can ask AI that question. For those of you that want to stay in touch and want to reach out to Nick or myself, here's our contact information. And we'll also share a recording and the slides here from today for folks. So, you know, if you don't have time to write this down necessarily, but yeah, feel free to reach out. I think I speak for Nick too. If we're generally always thrilled to connect with folks in the sector. That's why we're doing this, right?
Happy to.
And then as a little bit of a freebie, right? We have an ebook that we put together recently about unlocking the power of volunteers. It's a guide around volunteer management. So please take a look if you think that would be helpful. And then last but not least, we do have a end of year special. If folks are interested in checking out Civic Champs, basically all our new contracts are starting January 1, but anyone can sort of use us between now and then for free. So, and then this is actually the last webinar of the year for us. We've been doing these weekly now for a few months, so it's been a fun journey. But up for 2024, we have a lot of cool folks that are going to be joining us. I think we're kicking off the year with a co-presentation with Volunteer Match. You know, talking about 2023 trends. We're going to have some proprietary data from them, from us, that we're going to be sharing in terms of what's happening in the sector. We're going to be talking about how to engage and collect stories from your volunteers with our friends at Memory Fox. Sure Impact is, you know, they work on impact measurement, and so we're going to think about, you know, beyond just the dollars. The hours and perhaps, you know, sort of the dollar replacement value of volunteers. How else do you think about impact, right? So super excited. We'll keep you all posted. We'll send out notices when we have everything finalized here for 2024, but hopefully we'll see you all in the new year. And yeah, let me see if there's any other questions that have popped up. And I think that's, I don't think, yeah, Crystal, yeah, thank you for the kind words, really informative. But yeah, if that's it for everyone. Again, you know, really excited to have folks join us each week here, and we'll see you all in the new year. And in the meantime, happy holidays.